Good afternoon, everybody. Great to see such a lovely audience joining us today. This is our first workshop in a series of translational teamwork. So we're going to have 4 presentations, including this one, pretty much every week, minus Thanksgiving. But before we start with teamwork, I want to give a general overview of CTSI workshop series. For those of you who are new to CTSI workshop, I want to introduce our team. So I am Katia Noyes. I am the Director of Workforce Development for the CTSI. And in my spare time, I'm a faculty in the School of Public Health and medical school doing research on surgical quality and implementation outcomes. But today we're going to talk about something different. Today and for the 3 subsequent weeks, we're going to talk about teamwork. So this workshop is only one workshop in CTSI series that explicitly talks about teamwork. But there are many other workshops that we offer that do utilize teamwork, pretty much every single workshop. So if you're interested, you can go on the website of the CTSI. If you've never been there, please visit. There are lots of useful resources. And so we try to keep it updated. So you mostly see the recent semester, but there are recordings of the prior workshops. And then go to our library. So specifically for team science workshops, we recorded the last year workshops. We're going to record this year workshop. So last year workshops were more introductory to teamwork, sort of how teams work, why they don't work, how you know they work. And then we looked at feedback from our trainees, and they suggested that that's terrific, but there are also a lot of differences between different types of teams, clinical teams versus research team versus community engagement teams. So this year, we're specifically focusing on those differences that apply unique features of different teams. So if you want to review the basics, they are open. And if you need the link to the website, send Liz an email and she can direct you, or you can find it yourself on the website. So if you want to review the basics from the last year, this year we're going to talk about specifics, assuming you know a little bit about basics. So if things don't make sense when I talk about today, don't hesitate to ask questions. I'm happy to pause and explain some of the basic principles, but we'll try to go a little bit further for people who already attended the last year workshops. And so there are a variety of other topics that our experts present, and teamwork applies to all of them because there's very little you can do in clinical and translational science without working with teams of various investigators. So you will see us attending those workshops and making comments and referring to how team applies to those different settings. So if you attended the biostatistics series, we talked about how to work with biostatistician, how to hire biostatistician, sort of there's a little bit of that. And that comes across in all series. But specifically, the mechanics of teamwork would be discussed in this series. And so just to help you get an understanding of why we're talking about teamwork, so this diagram that Liz and Catherine have developed summarizes key skills and characteristics that distinguishes clinical and translational scientists from other types of sciences. And so we broadly organize them in 3 buckets, sort of hard skills at whatever field you are in. If it's a rehabilitation science, if it's a cognitive physiology, if it's computational biology, those are your hard research skills. Plus, there are skills related to study design, how to run clinical trials if you're doing clinical trials, how to recruit patients, etc. Our workshop series is not going to replace that. You still need the fundamental knowledge and your degree and whatever years of experience you have. But the other 2 categories of skills, the strategic skills and what we call soft skills, not easy skills, soft skills. Those skills, most of us didn't receive through our graduate and medical training, but they're very important in order to be clinical and translational scientists. So that's really why we developed the workshops, to help early and more established investigators to continuously improve and acquire new skills that they may have not received in their early years of training. And so team science and leadership is one of those skills that we're going to cover in this workshop series. So if you finish all 4, you're going to get your certificate of completion. And we track all that, so you'll receive it automatically in the mail. So at the end of each workshop, and you're going to receive an email from Catherine asking about feedback of that specific workshop series. So tomorrow you get an email from her about today's workshop series. And then if you attend one next week, it's going to be about the next work series. So please, please, please share your feedback. The surveys are confidential, but we read them very carefully. We discuss them, we share them among ourselves, and they help us design better material, better delivery, pedagogy, so that more people can benefit it and learn what they really need to support their research programs. So thank you in advance. Okay. Any questions before we start? Good. So Liz posted the link to where you can rewatch the last year team science workshops. So we title today's workshop Teamwork and Research. So we focus on research teams primarily. And we're going to talk about 2 of the key functions that key stages that all teams go through: storming and performing. So before we get there, let me tell you, this is the materials that recorded in the last year, and sort of what we talk about is teamwork, team leadership, qualities of people who work on the teams and how to develop those teams, and specifically leadership and multidisciplinary teams. So that's what in the folder. And the reason we picked storming and performing is because those are 2 key stages in any team formation. Most of the time when we talk about teams, we think about performing, right? That's what we want teams to do. But those preliminary stages, forming, storming, and norming, are required. You can't bypass them, just like you can't have a baby in 1 month. You still need all the gestational stages for the baby develop before you can deliver it. Same with teams. Any team, new team that just change a couple members, somebody left, you replace your biostatistician with a new person, you still have to allow for that time to happen. But for most people who are new to teamwork, that stage of storming is the most distressing one, because you think that if you're not getting along with your colleagues, if you can't find a consensus, if your meetings are distressing, that means that there is something wrong with your team. And many people quit at that stage, and they said, well, this team is dysfunctional, I need to leave, I need to find a new team, without realizing that that's organic and natural stage. And without that, you can really move into performing. So that's what we're going to talk mostly about today: how to storm, so evidence-based strategy for arguing or negotiating with your team, and how to overcome that period, and how to get to the stage of performing. Okay, good. Questions? All right. So moving on. So what is it about storming? Sort of what makes teams gel and work? And how do we know that we are there and that we're ready to move on to the next phase? So researchers, and this is work by Kara Hall at the NCI, who've done a lot of work researching teams, sort of not doing research on teams that most of us do, but actually researching teams in research and understanding their phases. And they distinctly categorize the process of teamwork into those 3 distinct phases. So when you start, how do you know that these people are going to be good teammates? What you can assess is their collaborative readiness. You haven't worked with them yet, but there are tools and psychometric strategies that we're going to try that can tell you, are these people even able to work on teams? Let's be realistic. Not everybody born as a team player. It's not detrimental. You can train people to be better team players, But depending on your timeline, if you have a time crunch and you have a short deadline to proposal, and you know you have a member on your team who is not a great team player or never been on a team or known to be distractive on a team, you want to strategize your meetings and your work differently, as opposed to when you have a very experienced team players who know how to negotiate and compromise and share and move along. So that team readiness is a very early phase before you even form the team that you can try to assess and predict and minimize the harm and distress of storming if there are people who are not great players. And we talk how you do that. And then the next phase, sort of once you already form a team and you agree that these are the people who are going to be with you on a team, sort of a little time has passed. For this particular project, this were years, but it could be weeks or months or whatever the timeline of your teamwork may be. Then you get to the idea of team capacity. You haven't produced anything yet. You haven't written a proposal. You haven't published a paper, but you can sense that you are producing. And sort of you need to think about that again strategically, how it applies to your project. If you're writing a proposal, is your team communicating? Are they providing you edits? Are they responding on time? Again, this is different from having a product. You may be only having discussions or meetings, but you can still assess that collaborative capacity, coordinating, sharing resources, providing constructive criticism, being able to take criticism, being able to give a sort of one of the qualities of the teamwork is that you watch each other back. So let's say one of your members is a clinician and they're on clinical service and they are unable to participate in the team meetings. Do they reach out after they finish the service and says, I'm sorry I missed the meetings. Can you please help me catch up? I want to make sure I'm following along and delivering you what you need me to deliver. Or I'm not available, but my residents are going to attend the meetings instead of me, and then he or she is going to inform me of what decisions you made about teams. Sort of, again, that person demonstrates capacity for teamwork, understanding that issue of interdependency. And that's very important for teamwork. And collaborative products is absolutely the last phase, which makes sense. Most of the things we do in research take time, sometimes a lot of time. So just because your team hasn't produced the products, it doesn't mean it's not functional. Or you don't have to wait until the team failed to deliver products to make a decision. This team is not performing well. We need to make a change. So this is example of the survey that measures that aptitude for collaborative work. So let's try to do it together. Take a piece of paper, so answer all these questions and score your answer for every question and sum them all together. And then once everybody has a chance to score the answers, we're going to go in Mentimeter and see how people evaluated their own attitude for collaborative work.
Katia, are we supposed to think about a specific project?
Yes. So think of your main team, the team that you work the most with right now, a team.
Okay.
So not necessarily a project if you're doing it alone, but a team project.
Okay.
Thank you, Linda. Okay, everybody clear what we're doing? So read, think about your the team that you work the most with and answer about that team. It doesn't have to be your favorite team. It just have to be the team that you work enough with, that you have enough interaction that you can answer these questions. All right, let's go into Mentimeter. Everybody has their score, right? So get in there. Everybody able to get in? I see people are joining. And then put your score or the range of your score about your team. And I see a couple people succeeded. Okay, good. Wow, very impressive. We have very experienced and happy team players. I'm really thrilled for you guys. Anybody having trouble accessing Mentimeter? We all in? Okay, I only see 11 people. There should be more. 12, okay. All right, so there are people who have less fun, but still pretty good. Okay. Linda, if you don't use smartphone, Catherine, can you please send Dr. Khan a link that she can go into Menti? It's very interesting. So it's clearly not a bell curve, right? So if you would think that your average distribution should be a bell curve, any continuous data, but we have very skewed data with a lot of successful team players, which is great. And it's funny that you all attending a teamwork seminar and you're already very team oriented. So I suspect you attending a seminar because you are very team oriented, but maybe your other team members are not very team oriented and you're a little bit frustrated and looking for strategies how to make it work. Okay, so we're up to 15. So this is a very, very simple tool that you can use in the beginning and during the process of a teamwork, especially if you're working with remote teams that you can't quite read people's body language and you don't see them on a daily basis. But you can throw it as an exercise before a team meeting or after a team meeting and says, just so we're all on the same page, and you get a pretty good idea. So if you skew to the right, you're in a good place. But if your team or several team members responding somewhere on the left end of the spectrum, you need to think carefully and review the practices and says, maybe these are not the right people. And sort of this is one of the take-home messages, hopefully, you're going to take home after this, our discussion today, is you don't need team for every research project. There are plenty of research projects that you can do alone, or with your graduate student, in front of your computer. You don't really need a team, and that's fine. Not all questions require a team. And then the second take-home message is that not all people can be on a team. And that is also a reality. And perhaps some people are not ready to be on the team yet. And so one of the most classic examples is that when we're trying to put a team together for a research study and it says, I want the expert in the field X, let me ask the chair of a department. And that may be the wrong move. The chair may not be the most team-oriented person. They may be too busy. They may be, their time may be split too thin. So the highest administrative hierarchy doesn't necessarily represent the highest teamwork skills. And that's, again, something to consider when you're selecting team members that are going to contribute to your team productivity and create an environment conducive to productive teamwork. Go back. So Liz and I did a survey of researchers at UB, people who have grants with multiple PIs, and we asked them so how they think, how they feel, and what their attitude is about teamwork. And even among established and very successful researchers in their own rights, not everybody is supportive of teamwork. So people like scientist number one, and there are many of them, there are people like that who believe that collaboration is a waste of time. There's no guarantee and no control of other people's quality of work, and you better to work alone and you'll get there quicker. We, of course, would like to be affiliated with people like scientist number two. In my personal research, most of the questions require multidisciplinary expertise. And unfortunately, people don't walk around with those quotations on their forehead. So you need to know them enough, or you need to understand their philosophies enough to know that you don't end up with people like scientist number 1 on your team. You want people like scientist number 2. Good. All right. Moving on. So we're going to hear more about the impact of teamwork on clinical teams. That most of evidence on clinical teams is that they really improve quality of work, so quality of patient outcomes, and they may save money and time and get there faster with fewer complications. In athletic teams, of course, good teamwork results in more wins and more prizes and money. And in many other fields, team may be focusing on doing things quickly, like in Formula One, changing 8 tires in 3 seconds, or running a dash faster than you would run a relay. So shaving off almost 7 seconds. But what do research teams do? Do we work faster? Are we more productive? So let's first get to the same page that we understand what team is. So we have 22 people on this Zoom call. Are we a team? Are we a team here today? What do people think? Yes, no, no. We're not a team. We're a classroom, right? So I have something to share with you. I would like you to learn as much of that as possible, but we are really not interdependent in any way. We'll finish this class today and we'll all go to our research teams and we'll do our own work, and we may never meet again. That would be unfortunate, but not impossible. We don't, other than the slides, we don't really coordinate any other resources. I share them with you, but you're not sharing anything with me except for your opinions. I hope we have a culture of psychological safety, meaning that you're comfortable sharing with us your questions. I'm comfortable sharing with you my experience. We able to talk regardless of our roles and positions and titles. So that hopefully that criteria is working, but the other two are not. And it's really the other two criteria that make it a team. Team are formed to solve a particular problem or to address a specific task. And then that task is over, that team can dissolve. Most of the time, clinical teams, you finish your day, you saw your patients in the clinic, you go home, and tomorrow you're going to be assigned to work with different people. You proposed a grant, you completed your grant, and for your next grant, you may actually work with different investigators because your research question is different. So the teams have a specific purpose and a specific relationship among them, and that's what keeps people together. So strictly speaking, academic department is not a team because we all evaluate it based on our independent academic productivity. So even though we talk about teamwork within departments, that's not the kind of teamwork that we're discussing here today. The teamwork we're discussing today is much more intertwined, much more interdependent, and much more goal-oriented. So let's look at another exercise. So we selected those 2 cases. So this is a case of a successful teamwork. Because these people admit they're interdependent and they shared their vision and goals, and we call it, they have a shared mental model. So let me read you the case. Dr. Henry recently joined a research team. Dr. Torres, the team leader, has set clear, tangible, short, and long-term scientific goals for her team. Dr. Henry and his fellow team members are able to articulate the goals and understand how their research results and other contribution will help achieve the team's overall vision. The team frequently discusses where it is going and how it wants to get there. In fact, once a quarter, the Torres convenes the entire team to discuss the team's progress toward this goal and whether adjustments need to be made. At these meetings, each team member, again, articulates his or her research goals, and the team discusses how the pieces fit together into the bigger picture, right? Beautiful story. That's where we want to be every day. Here is another case of another team where a shared mental model has not been achieved and the team is not gelling and is not performing. SPI, Dr. Cohen, the branch chief, and Dr. Milstrom appear to have a shared vision for the collaborative project in which they were involved. However, when it came to the implementation phase, it became clear that they did not agree on how to achieve the vision. They were at odds about when to move the findings from a laboratory to a clinical setting. Dr. Milstrom argued that the preclinical results were sufficient. Dr. Cohen argued that the mechanism behind the preclinical data was unclear, and until there was a better understanding of the results, the project should not be advanced to the clinic. Mediators and experts were needed to be brought in to help make the best decision for the research project. All right. So let's break up into two groups. You're going to be randomly assigned to case one, the good case, and case two, the unsuccessful case. And let's talk a little bit about what is it about those teams from information that's given to us, which characteristics of the players or processes and behaviors that were demonstrated by the team members led to the result. So either a successful result or the failure of the teamwork and conflict that we observe in case number two. And one of us, you will have a lead in each of the groups so that we'll remind you. And the materials are posted in your chat. So if you need to review the cases again, they're available for you in the chat. So let's go and spend maybe 10 minutes to talk a little bit more about the cases and get a better idea of what may be included in those team dynamics. All right. So how was your discussion, group number two, I guess, since I was with group number one? Did anybody prepare to share quickly, 30 seconds, how the failed teamwork team end up in that situation? Anybody from group number two? No. Liz, do you want to summarize your discussion?
Yeah, I can sum up for us. So overall, our Dr. Cohen and Dr. Milstrom had some conflict, and where they failed was that they didn't share the same visions and goals for their team. And how they could have been successful is from the forming stage, right from the very beginning, decided on what their shared goal, shared mental model will be for their team, as well as devising a plan of action for how to deal with the conflict before it arises. We did also talk about how the two doctors did have psychological safety because they both felt comfortable speaking up of what was wrong.
But it didn't help them, right? So psychological safety alone probably can't rescue a team. Sometimes it can, but yeah. And so here, so they ended up using mediators and expert, which is usually department chair or a dean sometimes, or there is a special person assigned in every school to mediate this kind of research conflicts. But what would have been helpful for this team is actually to have a team coach before they started working. Find somebody who can work with them in the beginning of their team storming, because this team really didn't pass the storming phase. They got stuck in their storming. They never fully negotiated the rules of the games. They never fully agree on the roles. So sometimes, so this is one of the strategies. If you have a team that's not able to gel naturally, bringing a team expert or a team coach who can gently guide outside of the team individual members and share with them strategies or giving them basically a mirror, sort of, this is how you sound in the room. Do you intend to sound so condescending, or do you intend to sound so undecisive? So if not, then this is what you can try. Or this kind of phrasing you can try to sound more firm or to sound less authoritarian. or maybe you want to meet with people one-on-one. Or sort of, there are various strategies a team coach can advise people, not only the team leader, but team members as well, if they're willing to make changes and save a team, and they value the ultimate goal of the team, so they're willing to give up some of their quirks and special behaviors. Anybody wants to add anything to Liz's summary? All right, what about our team number one, folks? Anybody wants to summarize briefly?
I can. So it's just the discussion revolved around the appreciation of establishing short and long-term goals, the value of every person in the team, and including small and regular meetings for updates by all team members.
Right, and those updates are not only about science updates, how is your analysis going, how many patients you recruited, it's also about updates on the team culture and team formation. Are we on the same page? Does anybody understand or misunderstands what our goals are and how we're going to achieve them? So as the researchers, we tend to focus so much on research protocol that often this team building gets forgotten. And maybe after you work together for 10 years, you don't need to do that anymore. But for any team that's newly formed or just had a change of core members, this psychological checkups, and if you can make them informal, if you can bring cookies, or if you can walk together for coffee, that you get the human dynamics figured out first, and then you layer the research dynamics on top of that. Okay. All right. Questions, thoughts? All right, moving on. All right, so let's say we accomplish our storming. So we resolve the conflicts, or hopefully resolve the conflicts. So, before we get there. So in another way, so in the beginning, we talked about measuring or assessing people aptitude for teamwork. And so in this process of storming, we can also measure gradient of agreement, we call it, but basically for any decision that the team needs to make. Are we going to go for February funding cycle, or are we going to wait until June? Are we going to go for NIH or NSF? Are we going to recruit only minority patients, or we're going to try to have a heterogeneous sample? Whatever the question may be, if you as a team leader sense that there may be differences in opinion, but people are not willing to speak up yet, which happens all the time, or people may not even realize they are disagreeing with your strategy, but they're uncomfortable sharing their thoughts, or they think they're not being valued, or something else may be going on. So this is, again, easy and quick strategy to basically show a thermometer and set up a question and ask people to vote, basically from, yes, I wholeheartedly support this idea, decision, plan, whatever that may be, or I absolutely not going to participate and I'm going to walk away if you continue with the strategy. So let's try to do an exercise, how that actually may work. And so Liz came up with this questions that are simplistic, of course, and not necessarily researchy, but just to illustrate you how this gradient of agreement exercise can play out. So the question is, question of the day, most important question, is a button-down shirt and pants a good office attire? Okay, let's do the poll. Please pick your preferred answer. So 1, absolutely agree. 8, no way in chance. Good. Catherine, you want to show the results? Okay. So what do we see? There are quite a few people, so almost 80%, 75%, so 3/4 of the people who agree or wholeheartedly agree but there are quite a few people who disagree. So if you have a situation like this, what can you do? You have a moderate disagreement. So what are our choices? So the leader can separately negotiate with the minority who disagree and try to understand their rationale. Are they disagreeing for some serious reasons? Religious reasons, philosophical reasons, capability reasons, something that was not explicitly clear ahead of time. So maybe we're all going to do a PCR, and sorry, I never done a PCR. I have no idea what PCR is. And I never disclosed that. It wasn't on my CV. Nobody asked me, but I'm really scared now that I have to do a PCR. All right, so we can talk about that. We can provide additional resources. So you can test how detrimental that decision may be for the safety of your team. And if you get a sense that this is absolutely team-breaking point, then you know that with this team, you need a different strategy. Let's do a second exercise. So again, very empirical question. The best vacation involves a beach. So let's vote on this one. All right, interesting that nobody abstains. So clearly people are engaged and they have an opinion, which is very important, which tells you that you don't have a dead wood on your team, that people do care. And that is important observation. Nobody vetoes, so you don't have my way or highway people. Most people are willing to negotiate, and so you'll see the results in a second. But I am actually very, very pleased with this team. I would like to work more with this team.
I have a question.
Yes.
So these two exercises, the statements were written as like a factual, dictatorial type way. You know, like my father-in-law who came from Germany would say, okay, frozen vegetables are the best.
Yeah.
But alternatively, if the leader asked the team, where would you like to go on vacation? That would change the dynamic, no? And that would open discussion. Although on the other hand, you don't want to going around in circles.
Right. So most certainly you can do that. But if you ask an open question, then you have an infinite number of possibilities, right? And so you may hear something that you're not prepared to offer.
But it might lead to better science.
Yeah, I agree with you. So this is, I'm not saying this is the only strategy to test agreement or disagreement, but maybe what you suggested, Linda, could be a next step. So if you pose an answer and you have a vast diversity in opinions, you said, okay, then I probably didn't know something about my team, or I suggested something unreasonable. Let's use Linda's approach. Let's have an open-ended question now and actually ask people what they think. So maybe it's not NIH versus NSF. Maybe there is another funding mechanism I'm not aware of that may be a much better fit for this program. I want to learn about it. So just like in most situations, you have multiple cases, and you can start with a simple, low-hanging fruit, and that could lead to an interesting and productive discussion. So we see the answer, right? Everybody can see the answer. So we have people pretty much equally split, those who disagree, don't want to be confrontational, want more discussion, and those who are very happy to put their swim in trunks and follow on the beach. And so again, as a leader, it's your call. You have to have enough emotional intelligence reading your team to realize that there may be something going on that people are not telling you. And people are willing to speak up, just like the fail case. The team failed, but they were able to speak up, and they told each other exactly what they think and exactly why they disagree. In those situations where you at least have communication, you can work with that communication. But there are many times where people are being passive aggressive, right? They stop showing up for meetings. They stop reporting. They stop submitting revised drafts. They're not disagreeing with you openly, but they're not productive. You have that sense that the team is not productive. So that's a leader's call to pause and reassess your strategy and your position, and perhaps you need a pivot. Or you may need a change in team composition. So that is another solution, a little more painful than that. Any other questions? Is this helpful at all? Good. All right. Okay, so let's move on. So just to summarize that teamwork actually requires different sets of skills and competencies. You need to know how team functions, right? And so that they have to storm, that you need to have some situational awareness. If it's a long-established team, that's transactive memory system. So if we did it that way last time and it worked really well, we have some certain patterns that I always proofread the first draft, and then Sue-Ann always proofreads the last draft, or whatever strategies you may develop. Those will accumulate over time and will make your team progressively stronger. But before you get there, you still need the attitude. The people who don't possess the right attitude are going to create a lot of challenges and problems for your team. And so no amount of teamwork is going to solve the problem where you have purposely disruptive people on the team, or disrespectful people, or people who believe they can do it all alone. So that, again, is a leader's role to diagnose what kind of problem we're having. Is it lack of skills, or is it the wrong attitude? And then make the decision. And then, of course, there are skills. How do we coordinate? Do we use UBbox? Do we email each other the last draft so that everybody has the last version? Do we take turns in leadership? I'm the first author on this paper, and Linda is the first author on the next paper, and we rotate. And then sort of share responsibility that way. Whatever the specific skills, and there are a variety of skills for teamwork that you can adopt some of them, and some of them fit better certain teams, and other skills and competencies may fit better different type of teams. And you're going to hear about different type of teams throughout this series, clinical teams and teams with community engagement. So different types of teams can use different strategies, but they need to be strategies. But they could be learned. Sort of those skill-based strategies, they could be learned. We can share them. We can all agree. I can show you how UBbox works if you don't know. I can show you how Menti works, so you can tell me what you use and what works for you, and we can all adopt that. Okay, but it's important to recognize that depending on where the problem is, you may need a very different solution to help your team get back on track. All right. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about leadership. And of course, there are very different teams, and we know teams. I think each of us knows teams that look like the one on the left or the one on the right. And you probably all know which ones is really about teamwork and which ones is just a membership on a team and nod and really not participating. And so the biggest myth about leadership, that team leaders are born, right? We keep hearing that. It's a very common phrase, and it's not true at all. That strategies and team and leadership can be actually learned. Otherwise, we will not have MBA programs, because if you can't teach leadership, then who are you going to teach there? But you can actually teach people, and you can learn your entire life. You never become a complete Olympic champion in leadership and teamwork. You can always improve, and it varies depending what kind of team you lead. So I like this expression. So this is a captain of the French soccer team. Then they won the World Cup in 2018. He said, a good leader is not the person who talks the most. It is the person who talks the most sense. So I assume it's translation from French, but it's a very good one. And of course, you can think of the people who think of themselves as great leaders, who will overtalk anybody in a meeting, and you never have an opportunity to put a word. But that doesn't make a great team leadership. And of course, we also know very different leadership styles. Some of them are more authoritarian than others. And yet it worked for their companies and made the companies very successful. It doesn't mean it's going to work for your team. So the leadership style has to match the team composition and, most importantly, team objectives. And so again, when we're talking about characteristics of successful teams, where does the role of the leader fits in those three key characteristics of teams? What do people think based on what we discussed today? Which one of those characteristics leadership affects the most?
If there's just one, I would say psychological safety.
And how is that, Susan?
I think that you have to create an environment for people willing to participate, and they have to feel safe and valued in the team. So
I know you experienced leader. So how would you do that? How would you project that message?
I think I would, in a team meeting, I would make sure that the voice of every person in the group was heard. So if someone was more quiet, I might say something like, we've heard from a number of you. Is there anyone else who would like to contribute something who hasn't had a chance to speak? Or, not to single anyone out, but just to try to really encourage the more quiet person that may have a contribution to come forward.
That's a good strategy. Anybody else can think of a strategy or maybe share a strategy that worked for their team, where as a team leader, you can clearly communicate that psychological safety to your team, especially a new team?
I think with interdisciplinary teams, it's important to provide safety and say something like, Ellen, you come from X discipline. What is your perspective on this project or this issue we're dealing with, so that everybody understands what the other disciplines bring to the table?
That's a good suggestion. So you as a leader know the differences and the unique perspective of your team members, and you can highlight that for other members so they feel that, oh my God, I'm not this awkward outlier. I actually contribute a very important part.
I often do that with medical students. Like, well, what have you observed in the clinic that pertains to what we're talking about?
Okay, good. Anybody else? I haven't heard much from other people. Please speak up in light of psychological safety. I hope everybody's comfortable speaking up, or you can type your answer if you can speak up. So what about the leader behavior themselves? So you can stand there and tell your team that, oh, I respect everybody, and then just run over them in a conversation or cut somebody off, or don't respond to their messages or concerns, right? So the first really strategy, most probably easy and but also effective strategy is not to say don't do what I do what I say, right? We know that doesn't work with kids. It doesn't work with team members either. So if you claim you support our psychological safety, you have to be the first person who admits your own mistakes, admits your own shortcomings. So that works very well. And very often people think, well, if I'm a leader, if I admit I have weaknesses, people are going to lose respect for me. In reality, very often works the other way around, because people are going to see your weaknesses regardless. And if you don't admit them or pretend they don't exist, they're going to think you're a phony. So admitting your real weaknesses, or perhaps limitation to your expertise, right? That's easy to do. I cannot be expert in everything. I know my field, but I don't work with court systems like Linda. And if I have a question, I will say, Linda, I have no idea. Can you please correct my strategy? Or I defer to your expertise. How do we engage with a court or something like that? Right. And
then I call a judge because I don't know.
That's fine, right? But at least, hopefully, a leader disclosing their weaknesses and limitations will indicate to other people that, oh, okay, if she got to that far and she still has limitations, maybe it's not that bad. maybe it's okay that I don't know something. At least with this team, hopefully I can learn something. So you may figure out different strategies, and you may try them on your team and see if it's working. And it really depends. So I work a lot with surgeons, and those people have no limitations. Every one of them believes that they're experts in everything, and no amount of pleading for psychological safety, I think, going to change that. But there have been changes in culture of surgical departments in the last 20 years that I observed, and they're becoming more sort of accepting and inclusive. So it's possible, even in surgical departments. Anybody else have any other examples of how to empower your teammates or your team to create that environment where people feel comfortable sharing, receiving criticism, offering criticism, responding to criticism without going on a defense? Okay, all right, moving on. Okay, so often, in English language at least, we use leadership and management interchangeably. He's a great leader. He manages his team so well. In reality, if you think of the meaning of these two terms, leader versus manager, they are very, very different. So if I try to summarize here main differences between management. Management is another way delegating, right? Breaking big tasks into small pieces, figuring out who is better suited to do what. Leadership, in the pure sense of the word, is we talk about influencing relationship, creating a culture of inclusiveness, creating a culture of psychological safety, empowering people to do their best, motivating them to work hard, to overcome challenges, setting up the goal for the team, and correcting the goal if evidence demonstrates that that goal is probably not the right goal, or maybe it's not achievable goal. Monitoring everybody's performance and recognizing that the team may not be gelling well. So actually both managers and leaders may be doing that. So then when we're talking about team leadership, so ideally you want to have a manager and a leader, or the same person should have management capability and leadership capability. But just being a good manager may not be quite enough to accomplish, to build a successful team. If team already built and it's working, a manager alone can probably carry it to the finish line. But if we're talking about a process of starting a new team, storming, performing, and norming with a new team, and getting to the finish line, a management may not be enough. And I want you to pause for a second and maybe think of the teams where you worked, and think of the leaders you work with. Were they truly a leader, or were they more managers, right? And just because they have a title of department chair or the dean, it doesn't mean they're leaders or the managers. That's a title that's given to them, because these characteristics are about behaviors, not the titles. And so next time you're frustrated with your leadership, you can try to understand, okay, what's lacking? They're telling me to do, but they're not empowering me what to do. Or they're telling me to do something that against my best interest, so I can't really follow them because I never get promoted if I work extra hours clinically. It's not, this person is not my leader. They are unfortunately my supervisor, but I need a different leader. And sort of maybe you need to find an outside mentor or something like that. Or again, if your team consistently not making improvements, is the problem with management? We don't have a clear deliverables and clear task? Or the problem is that we don't know where we're going. And that's a completely different problem, because if you don't know where you're going, you're never going to get there. So again, separating these two roles that may belong to the same person, but separating those two roles may help us diagnose some of the dysfunctions of the teams and create an interventions how we can either fix it or sort of admit the failure, stop wasting time, and dissolve and form a new team with true leadership. And so if we look carefully for any definitions of team leadership, then conflict resolution and managing relationship is really one of the fundamental characteristics that distinguishes leaders from managers. And so because of that, the new science of leadership, that it's really not about perfecting the science, it's really perfecting the skills and culture building and emotional intelligence and relationship managers. So, and it's, if you look at sort of the people that Fortune 500 companies distinguish as the true leaders, and most of them are older white men that know nothing about relationship management, but they probably were not the true leaders of their organizations. They were probably the face or the sort of the role-carrying investor, but there must be other people behind them. And I don't know if any of you saw a movie, Steve Jobs. So I was shocked to find out that there were many other very powerful individuals in the Apple, other than Steve Jobs, who managed the relationship, who nurtured the teams, who built the teams. But the public image of Apple only allow us to see the very top of the iceberg, the personality of Steve Jobs, and kept everybody else completely opaque. Because I always wondered how that organization functioned, and it didn't. So at the time, and so don't get too hung up on who wears the hat. Think of who the true leaders are, especially if you're trying to change your behavior in an organization, or you're trying to build a relationship with another organization. Try to understand who the true leader is. And again, on clinical teams, very often you think it's a doctor that sign up the treatment plan. It's very often the nurse practitioner or the unit nurse manager who is a true leader, who knows the relationship, who knows the role and responsibility of people. And on research teams, often it's a PI, but I know a lot of very strong research team, very functional research team, where PI is not really the leader, but there is another person, an experienced administrator, or maybe a project manager, who really wears that hat and work very well in tandem with a PI who brings the funding and then delegates to another person to do the very important work of leadership and empowerment and management. All right. And so here is, before we wrap up, sort of this is a slide that summarizes different types of leadership, sort of to make it explicit. So that question that I asked you early, what kind of leader are you? And what kind of leadership fits your style, what kind of leader you need? So the commanding, of course, we all know that, that tell you what to do what I tell you. They drive you to achieve, and they sort of express a lot of self-control, but they may not necessarily care about what you think about the decisions or the goal or the strategy or the vision, right? They already made all the decisions. So this type of leadership, while it exists and it's very common, is probably not the best fit for a team leader, unless person has a really great emotional intelligence and can recognize some of the nuances. So that the visionary leader, it's perhaps the one that more suited for leading a team, especially a research team, sort of people who possess self-confidence, but they're also empathetic. This is my timer. They said, look at me, come with me, I'll show you the way. So we like this kind of people. So why can't everybody be that kind of leader? What's the problem with that leadership? Can we see a problem with that leadership? It takes time, right? So, and if you don't want to come with me, what are you going to do then? You already got the job. Sort of, if it's a good fit, it works. But for people who are not sold out on that vision, it may be a little weak to convert the non-believers. And then so the next type is the affiliative type, is sort of, this is what most people think the teams are, right? Let's hold hands, let's have a picnic together, we build relationship, we communicate, and sort of that's, I think when people think about why some people don't like working in teams is, I don't have time to do this. I don't have time to do team building. I don't go to the movies with my coworkers. I'm very busy. And that's one of the challenges with this type of leadership. They focus too much on relationship and not enough on deliverables, right? Because we know you don't have to love your colleagues. You have to be productive with your colleagues. You don't have to be friends with your teammates, but you have to be able to achieve the objectives of the team. So many people, not everybody, but many people find that those affiliative and pathetic leaders is a little too much, too much into your face. And then, of course, we have a democratic leaders, right? And so we all know them. They ask you what you think. What would you like to do? They ask everybody for their opinion. They open to other people's opinion and ideas. And you will have long meetings where everybody have an opportunity to speak up. And then what happens is that we don't come to consensus, right? We heard everybody, it was great. Everybody had the opportunity to express their thoughts. But when somebody has to do the integration work, what are we going to do with people who disagree? What do we do about people who offered some interesting ideas? Who is going to investigate if those ideas are valuable or even possible, given the resources and the timeline we have? So there are situations where democratic leaders work extremely well. And then there are situations, and if you're in the operating room and the patient is bleeding and the blood pressure is dropping, you don't have time to figure out what everybody thinks and what the possible cause is. You need to react. If a grant is due on Monday and on Friday you don't have a good draft, there's no time to talk about it, who is going to do what and what you think. You got to act. So, and then the two other types, so pace setting is somewhat similar to visionary. I don't think I can really distinguish it two. I think visionary is more about, let's see the bigger picture, and pace setting is do what I do. So visionary is join me on this journey to world peace, as opposed to pace setting. I write grants and you're going to write grants. I write paper for this journal. I think you have to do the same because it works so well for me. And sort of, which again, for many situations, for a training grant, that may be a terrific quality for a mentor or a leader. It may not work as well in a multi-institutional collaborative that have to bring people with very different expertise. And so my favorite, actually, I admit the bias. I like the coaching approach for leadership. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but if you tell me what you're trying to achieve, I can guide you in that process. I can share with you experiences that I've seen work for other people, not only for me, or I can share with you the evidence that worked, but you make the decisions. I help you work out the strategy and the process, and I'll support you for that, but it's your call.
So, I do have a question. Do you mind if
yeah.
We have a question in chat. May I ask it?
Yeah, sure.
You alluded to this already, but I wanted to make sure that it was still asked. Do different leadership styles work best with specific types of projects? You did talk about the fact that if something is due right away, or obviously someone's bleeding out, you need to take a specific leadership style. But can you answer if different leadership styles work best with specific types of projects when we're not dealing with emergency situations?
I do believe so, but I think it's a multifactorial. So the leadership has to match the project, but it also has to match the people that you bring on a team, which also match the project. And so I don't know how many of you taking your personality tests. Liz, I'm blinking on what's it called? The one that we do here at UB?
We have DISC and we have
DISC.
Clifton
Yes.
Strengths.
Yeah, so it tell you what kind of person you are. Are you the person who likes to throw ideas, but you never complete the project? Or are you people who like to cross all the T's and dot all the I's, but you're really not comfortable sort of going outside of the box? So it really depends who the people are on your team psychologically, and also in terms of their expertise. Are they academics? Are they trainees? There are many factors that I think goes into leadership. And when it all clicks, it works. It's much harder when things are not quite working and you can't put your finger on it that says, what's not working here? Is it the leadership? Is it our data management? Is it that we don't have the right people on the team? But at least, hopefully, what we talk about today can help you think of what may be going wrong. And hopefully you learn some of the strategies of how, once you identify what's wrong, how to fix it, or at least try to fix it. And if it doesn't work, then you're on the next strategy. Just like if aspirin doesn't work for your headache, then you're going to go and get a prescription medication and then hopefully lobotomy and something else. But start with the least invasive, go to the most invasive. And so one thing I want to mention before we run out of time is that I don't think it's right to think of the leadership as something set in stone, that I am always the coaching leader and that's the only thing I can do. We actually, as humans, are much more adaptable. And in different situations, we may be able, or at least most people, may be able to use different leadership styles. So if everything's working and your team is all set up and things are under control, you may be coaching, you may be more democratic, but you got a note from NIH that your funding got cut, or your main person went on maternity leave, and now you have to completely change your team dynamics, and you may switch to a different leadership style because you may not have time now to get everybody's opinion. You may need to be more focused, and you may need to be more aggressive. Or perhaps now you have to go and advocate for your team with a dean or the provost, and you're going to have a very different relationship and dynamics when you're managing up and working in administrative teams than how you act when you work on your sort of flat research teams. So knowing those different strategies, again, help us adjust in many different situations. And the classic example is that you don't have to lead all the time. So let's say in our group meetings with Liz and Catherine, when we're working together, so sometimes I lead and I said, we need to do that. And I think these are the ideas to do that. And sometimes I said, Liz, you really know all the literature on teamwork and workshops that's been developed. Can you please help us develop a strategy? And so instead of being a leader on that specific task, Liz is going to be the leader, and she's going to work with Catherine and I and help us formulate sort of ideas and a strategy for the next workshop. Sort of having that adaptive leadership style can help teams get through various external changes that you may not anticipate, but that may be thrown out of you. And so having additional tools, and again, using your best resources, the skill and expertise of the people on your team, may help you get more productive and beat the competition and get to the finish line. So you'll get all the slides. I'll mention again that you may not need team for every project, and here is the algorithm we developed that you can test if your project actually needs a team or not, or you can do it alone. And in conclusion, I want to emphasize that teamwork is not about just feeling good, which a lot of team opponents think, oh, holding hands, going to the picnics. Teamwork has direct impact on team productivity. However, it's measured by output, by time to finish line, by resources we use. There's a strong empirical evidence. And so focusing on teamwork is a very important skill. However, team training is not the same as team building. As we talked about, some of the shortcomings of team players could be overcome with training, but if team is not designed correctly, or you're missing the core expertise, or you got a toxic person, my kids call them the locker room cancer. So that's what they say in the sports team. So it's a research team cancer. Team on cancer, then you may need to do something radical and change your team and maybe change the focus of your team. That the leadership and teamwork are interdependent, and there's a lot to be said about different styles of leadership and matching style to the team culture, etc. And then feedback is really the only way how we learn. If your team is not providing you feedback on your leadership, it's going to be very hard for you to adjust. And that's one of the main reasons why psychological safety is so important, because open and honest disclosure allows for course correction. If we don't know what the problem is, there's very little that can be done about it. If we're not prepared to admit there is a problem, we again cannot fix it. So starting with psychological safety opens the door for communication, which opens again doors for course correction, adaptation, and give us a chance to succeed even when we think we're failing. I'll remind you that we have a great seminars lined up for you. Next week, Lorene Tamil-Bellholder from Department of Family Medicine, who is the director of the Community Engagement Corps for CTSI, is going to talk about teamwork with community partners. And we always happy to hear from you, direct you to more resources, and please, please, please fill in the evaluations that Catherine's going to send tomorrow. We value your feedback very much. Thank you.